I am now going to pass it over to Aureen Zara, Assistant Curator at the museum and one of our curators for the Paper Routes Women to Watch 2020 exhibition. Hi, Aureen.
Hi, Carolyn. Hi, Mira. And hello, everyone. Happy July. I hope you're all keeping safe and cool wherever you are, if it is indeed summer for you. We're nearing 100 degrees in a couple of days here, so I hope everybody is able to keep cool here. I'm very pleased to be able to speak to Mira Burak today, our Women to Watch artist representing New Mexico. As you may know, our Women to Watch exhibition series is a collaboration with our outreach committees who, with the support of consulting curators from their regions, help us highlight dynamic contemporary artists working in a particular theme. So first and foremost, I would like to thank Nancy Olson, Sean Gilmore, and the rest of the New Mexico committee, as well as Laura Addison, curator at the Museum of International Folk Art in Santa Fe, for all of their support with Women to Watch 2020. This year's theme sees artists working inventively with the medium of paper, so not necessarily works on paper like photographs and drawings, but making art out of paper, really making paper the primary medium. So today's artist, Mira Burak, practices collage in unique and fascinating ways, which I will let her discuss in just a minute. But she also uses her medium as a way to really activate our senses and uses the tangible and physical properties of paper in a way to explore something that is more sort of metaphysical. So in her work, we find a really profound connection between the conscious and the unconscious. So you may not be surprised to know that Mira received her bachelor's in studio art and psychology from Pepperdine University in Malibu, and she received a Master of Fine Arts from Cranbrook Academy of Art. She was born in Boston and grew up on the coast of Maine, and then lived in Detroit for 10 years, and ultimately relocated to New Mexico. She has exhibited nationally and internationally, including New York, Chicago, Michigan, Slovenia, Canada, Germany, and many other places. Mira currently lives in the foothills of the beautiful Ortiz Mountains in New Mexico, which she is showing us a sneak peek right now and making us all very envious of her. So with that, I will just turn it over to Mira and let her walk us through her practice. Welcome, Mira.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everybody in the West, and good afternoon, everybody in the East. I just want to say thank you to the museum for inviting the artists to do these studio visits during this time. It's been wonderful to learn about the different artists since we're not able to gather in DC right now. And as Aureen said, I'm sitting here on our property amidst the juniper and pinyon trees in the foothills of the mountains, in a rural area about 45 minutes outside of Santa Fe. And I'll head into my workshop in a few minutes, but I just wanted you to see the texture of the place that really grounds all of my work right now. And I'm so grateful to show my work at the museum. I deeply respect the work that you do, and I just want to share a little anecdote that just happened to come up last week. I work part-time for arts writer and activist Lucy Lepard, and I help her organize her archive. And I came across a stack of letters that she and a group of very important women artists wrote to museums and academia across the country, demanding equal representation of women in exhibitions, collections, and teaching positions. And these letters were dated 1970, 1971. And my heart just dropped into my stomach when I read those dates, and I thought, this has been 50 years already. and we are still not even close to gender equity and racial equity. And so I don't want to take for granted that each and every day the museum works towards advocacy for women artists. I don't take it for granted at all. I don't take for granted the women that came before me that have worked tirelessly for 50 years and prior. But thank you for making a place to, to put women in the contemporary art world and into art history. It's a deep honor. I'm grateful to also the New Mexico Committee and curator Laura Addison for nominating me for the Paper Routes exhibition. And to you all that are taking an hour or so out of your day to listen during this incredibly challenging time in the world, that means a lot to me, and thank you. I'm just gonna walk you all into the workshop here. Just take me a couple of minutes. Life and my art practice are very integrated, and over the years the work has taken many different forms, including installations and community-based work. And today I just going to focus my talk mainly on the paper-based collage works, and hopefully we're not going to get disconnected here. Are we still connected?
Yep, we're good.
Still hear me? Okay, great. Okay. So I thought I'd start by showing a few images of my work to give you background, and then we can move into looking at some of the things that are in the space here. And so as I mentioned before, my work is grounded in my immediate environment, and that could be the interior of my home or the exterior of the landscape around me, and often those things are intersecting and blurred. And so this piece is called From the Bed to the Mountain, and it was created for specifically a solo exhibition at the Q Art Foundation in New York City in 2015. And they had this big, long, amazing wall, and I wanted to evoke the sort of grand, sensuous landscape of the Ortiz Mountains, where I live with my family, and then also depict simultaneously what I call the unconscious sculptures that we make in our sleep. These are photographs of my husband and I's bedding, and I'll show a detail of that in one more minute. And in front of it is a table that I made of found wood from our property with 20 or so botanical sculptures that have corresponding photography collages. And if we move to the detail of image 2, you can see a close-up of the photographs of the bedding. So there are hundreds and hundreds of photographs collaged together, in which I've isolated the actual comforter from the context of the bed and the room by just cutting out that, what I call that form, that unconscious sculpture. And if you move to the next image, we can see, I'm not seeing it coming up yet, but maybe there's just a delay. Okay, you can see one of the a few of the botanical sculptures on the table. So you see a mountain mahogany branch, which is a bush that is here on the landscape. And then next to it, you can see the actual collage material of that, a photograph of that same branch.
So it's as if the photograph becomes like a shadow to the actual plant material. And you know, many of my projects explore the site of the bed and the legacy of sleep. And as Aureen said earlier, the intersection of the materiality of the bed and the consciousness of what our mind is experiencing during that time of rest. And I really believe there's like a wisdom of this horizontal state where all parts of our body are laying on a equal plane. And it's a very fluid place. And I believe the innate sensual movement of cloth really speaks to that fluidity of experience when you're in that horizontal position. And if we move to the next image, we can see another piece called Sun, S-U-N, Sun, S-O-N. And this piece is actually going to be one of the installations in the museum exhibition. Again, it's made up of hundreds of photographs of my son's baby blanket that my mother knit for him. And then it has a painted center that's painted directly on the wall. And, you know, we spend a third of our lives in bed. And so I think it's really potent territory that I may be exploring for the rest of my life. But I just really love the intersection of materials, relationships, you know, human relationships between me and my son, between me and my husband, and how they're embodied in the physicality of the bed. And then more broadly, like all of our experience of rest in a very fast-paced existence that we live in. And in this piece in particular, I think it just brings together interior worlds with exterior worlds, the interior of my son's sleep with the exterior world of the powerful New Mexico sun where we live. So moving to the next image. Sorry, I have bugs flying around me. This piece is Water Drop 2, and this is a series of artworks of different water drops that explore humanity's complex relationship to water. And living in the desert has really amplified this for me. The fluid, and also I feel like the fluid properties of water are mirrored in the qualities of cloth. And so I'm in these different water drops, I'm trying to focus on a single drop that aims to bring attention to the essential need for water in human bodies, in animals, in the land, our bodies being made up of 60% water. So you'll see a few more of these water drop pieces, but if we move to the next two images, we can just show this one quickly. I am just greatly indebted to the New Mexico Committee and the Center for Contemporary Arts in Santa Fe for opening an exhibition of the nominees for the Women to Watch program from New Mexico. And this exhibition opened the first weekend in March, right before we all went into quarantine. And so I wanted to just share the installation there of my work. And it's a beautiful exhibition. I'm honored to be among 4 other artists that were nominated who are incredibly talented. And, you know, thank you CCA and the committee for putting this exhibition together and for supporting the work of women artists in New Mexico. It's just so greatly important. So moving on to the next image. This is a piece called Dark Water Drop, another piece in the series of water drops that I mentioned. And this will actually be in the exhibition at the museum as well. It's made up of hundreds of small photographs of a comforter that I actually put a black duvet on to photograph it so that it would embody the nighttime and the darkness of sleep. And I have a few pieces that I've used that black bedding for. And, you know, as I'm continuing to explore water and how desperately important it is that we all have clean water around the world, specifically when I made this piece, I was also thinking about the horrific water crisis in Flint, Michigan, which I've been in New Mexico for 6 years, but I lived in Detroit prior to that. And that is just one example of sort of really many challenging situations around the world when it comes to the basic need for clean water. So I'm thinking a lot about that. And then if we move on to the last image, this is a new piece that I created in early January of this year called The Earth is Our First Bed. And I continue to work with hundreds of layered photographs of the comforter with the black duvet on it. This is 8 foot round, so when you stand in front of it, you can really feel enveloped by the space. It's installed directly on the wall in the center. It's a painted black surface, and then the collage material is attached around that. And it's really a piece, a call to remember that the earth is our first bed. We were all born into the world held by the earth. It continues to sustain and hold us. And I really wanted to bridge that human intimacy with the earth so that we could really think about our reciprocal care that's necessary for each other's survival. It holds us and we hold it, kind of is the feeling that I was thinking about when making this piece. And really in all of my projects, I'm just asking, you know, how do these materials of daily life that we live so closely with, you know, teach us about intimacy, engage our senses, provide comfort to us, heal us, invite rest, and elicit pleasure, which I just think are some of the most important elements of life. With that, we can come back into the space here. And can everyone still hear me okay? Okay. So I just finished a few new pieces that I wanted to share with you. The one to this side of me, I guess it's my left, your right, is called Sleeping Angel, Grieving Angel. And I'll walk closer to it so that you can see it close up. It's about 7 feet wide by 7 feet tall. And it combines both the actual comforter and the photographs of the comforter. So these are photographs of this comforter when it was on my husband and I's bed at one point. And I'm hoping that that can communicate that you can see the difference in the materiality, so that we can basically look at this material in 2 different ways simultaneously. And then recently I also made what I'm calling these 2 golden eggs, and they're made up of my son's baby blanket that's also in that other piece that will be in the museum. And the piece that's you're seeing right now is on a matte photo paper, and this one is on a glossy photo paper. So this probably won't communicate over Zoom, but it really is important to me that I use different papers when I'm making my collages, and that they can add to the layers of material language that I see in the pieces. Just so you have a context, this is the actual baby blanket that is in those 2 golden eggs. You can see my mom knit this beautiful heart pattern on it. And, you know, I thought I'd just share a little bit more about my process before we go to some time for questions. You know, I'm always photographing the materials around me, and often over long periods of time. So I'm getting hundreds and hundreds of photographs where I'm shooting the material at many different angles, from above, from all around the periphery, and also just with whatever natural light is in the room. So that kind of changes the hues that are in the actual photographs. I'm not a trained photographer. In graduate school, I studied textiles and fiber. And so I really see the photograph and the paper that it resides on as a tool to capture the essence and the experience of a material. And I have just some loose pieces of photographs that you can see here, like how I might put them together, but I want you to just see that, you know, the photographs can often be like varying sizes of a couple of inches, or some of the pieces are 4 to 5 feet long, just one individual photograph. And when I'm collaging them, you know, I label all the photographs on the back with numbers. Sometimes it's a very intuitive process collaging them, and then other times I'm actually looking to create some sort of pattern. So I want to know the progression in which the images were shot. So that in that way, the numbers on the back really help me with that process. You can see this is another small photography collage that I just finished, called Moss. And this is made up of photographs of my daughter's baby blanket, also knit by my mother in the same pattern, but you can see both the blanket and the photography collage together. And then the back, you can see, hopefully, there's a lot of artist tape and numbering of each of the images. And really, when I handle this material, I don't even think of it as a photograph. I actually think of it like it's a textile or a plant, if it is a photograph of a plant. That being said, I think I'm also drawn to the inherent qualities of paper, as it's flexible, it has sheens that I can manipulate, it can be cut, it can bridge 2 dimensions and 3 dimensions, and it has such, you know, a powerful history as an illusionary space. So I think in all my efforts to print, cut, arrange, collage, install, there all seem to be like an attempt to resuscitate the material back into being. So I'll leave you with that thought, and we can move into some questions and answers. But thank you all so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Mira, for that really wonderful presentation and talk. And I just wanted to stay on this topic of 2D and 3D, because when Ginny, co-curator for Paper Roots, when we first saw your work, that's one of the things that first intrigued us, because we couldn't quite figure out, is it sculptural, is it flat? So as you have these pieces in front of you, can you tell us a little bit more about the interplay between 2-dimensionality and 3-dimensionality? So the pieces that you held up right now, as well as the golden egg pieces behind you, are they flat surfaces, or are they more sculptural and textured?
They are completely flat. I mean, they are layered, and you can actually, you know, see when you get close, but often viewers in experiencing my work feel like they walk into the room and it actually looks like 3 dimensions or like a textile, and then they get up close and then you have this sort of very strange experience. And I'm really interested in that liminal space. and that's where I feel like we can learn something new about the material just by seeing it through a new lens. And I just call that this kind of hidden language of the material. Photography really allows me to sort of do that.
Then there seems to be an interplay and a back and forth, because you start off with an actual physical comforter or bedding, which is 3-dimensional. Then you take a photograph of it, becomes 2-dimensional, and then you layer it, which becomes, again, in a sense, 3-dimensional. So I love that there's this continuous sort of back and forth in your process and in your practice overall.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to wait for some questions to come in, but first, Nancy Olson is on here, and she says hello, and she says that she's extremely proud that you're one of the nominees and you're being featured in Women to Watch. So hi, Nancy. I wanted to, since you started off showing us this beautiful exterior where you live, and as I mentioned in your biography, you have been all over the country. You have a fascinating sort of biography of being on the East Coast, Midwest, West Coast. So just want to start off with a basic question of what is it that drew you to New Mexico in terms of your art practice, and particularly as you're outside of Santa Fe, you're kind of in this rural mountainous area, and that you inspire from place and where you are for your art. What was it about where you are right now that inspires you and drew you here?
Yeah. Well, as I said, my life and my practice are so intertwined. And so I'll simultaneously answer that, like, my mother really was the trailblazer coming to New Mexico first. And when I had my children and we were in inner city Detroit, and I just wanted to imagine my son like running free through a safe landscape and, not be inhibited in any way. That was sort of the first instinct to be drawn to move to Mexico, was family and place. But I also think there's something about New Mexico that is a very horizontal existence. There's more land than people. It, even in the biggest of cities, the mountains are the backdrop to any of tall buildings. So I feel like there's a little bit of a permission to live a little bit differently in this landscape. And something that I've experienced is it's more on the very basic level, like connected to an earth-based type of living, but then also an intuitive way of living. Potentially, I'll even reach out and say a little bit more feminine than the masculine sort of hierarchical view, but something that is more, has more equanimity to it. So that's really sort of a core being drawn, some of the core reasons I was drawn here.
As you were answering that, we just got a flood of questions. So I'm going to, because I think everybody is really interested in this idea of location and really place. And actually, I believe one of our other Women to Watch artists asks if there's a relationship between natural light, since you are in this really beautiful area, and the concept of fluidity in your work as you photograph.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. I love that question because ultimately I'm thinking of fluidity everywhere, in the whole process. So from the actual process of making to the actual final piece, I just want that to be fully embodied. So I think my resistance to set up, photographic lighting and, to really make a set of it kind of takes away from that flow. And I'm really interested in that flow. So the light is just sort of one more part of that. and in New Mexico, certainly light is like one of the most powerful forces in the environment. And also darkness, it's where we live, there are no street lights or anything. And so, the array of stars that you can see at night is just magnificent, really magical. Oh.
Aureen, you're still muted, Aureen.
Right. What becomes with all the items that you photograph?
Great question.
You showed us some of the bedding.
Yeah. I mean, my children are still sleeping with those blankets, and hopefully they will take them into their, adult life with them. This new piece behind me is really one of my first pieces where I'm integrating the bedding and the photography together. And I'm really excited about this new territory. I can see because I collect all of our old bedding. And, I get really excited about new bedding too. But, it as I think naturally as I have materials from my life, they could become a part of the piece or a part of an archive, some of them. But I don't necessarily buy new materials for pieces. I like that they come from my life. That being said, I did buy the black duvet cover to put on the comforter. I've never slept in a black bed, but I do think that there are places where I might interject that sort of creative license to buy the material. But I love when it just naturally comes from my life. And yeah.
There was a question that perhaps you mentioned a little bit in the beginning about your process, which from attending previous studio tours we love talking about here. Do you start off with sketches? Is it sort of a organic process? You kind of you see the material and you kind of know what the ultimate how it will unfold, what the ultimate shape will be. How do you begin your process of making these collages?
Mm-hmm. It differs, actually. Sometimes I get like a lightning bolt image of what a piece should be in its final form. And that actually happened with this piece behind me, in which I'll do like the most basic sketch in which I'll write where the collage material will go, and and collage material and a drawing of the fabric. No sketch that I would ever really share. And then other times I'm just so enamored with the material, I just photograph it until an idea comes. But I often do have like an image of a form or a place I'm trying to capture before I begin a piece.
I have a couple of questions that I'm going to combine about this idea of rest and sleep, that rest is both work but also about healing. Restorative rest is about work but also healing. And the question is to you, can you talk more about what part of your process is taking place during sleep, if at all?
That's a really interesting question. I do really cherish my rest with my family and by myself. And I'm not somebody that records my dreams a lot. Actually, you might think that might be a common, like something that I would do, but I'm very interested in listening to other people's stories about rest. And I've actually held a few different rest workshops where we actually share those stories with each other about our own rest. So I am interested in that way in which we can all learn more about this kind of mysterious thing we call sleep, because even scientists are still very much uncovering it. But I don't necessarily get ideas for artwork when I'm resting or sleeping, but I do when I have really big challenges in my life, of any kind. I often lay down to ask for the answer. And I find if I ask the answer when I'm standing up, I can get all heady and analytical. But if I lay down and ask that same question, like I feel like all the organs in my body are on an equal plane and I get the holistic answer. So I invite everybody to test that hypothesis, but it works for me.
Okay, I'm going to ask just a couple more questions. Do you ever dye fabrics? You said you bought a black duvet to cover up some of your bedding. Do you ever, since you see a lot of the textiles as, your collages as textiles, do you ever treat them like fabrics?
I do. And I actually had a collaborative installation a couple of years ago with my dear friend Kate Dodrill, in which we filled an entire gallery with soil and created like a spa-like environment. We had a deck around it. And I actually have them right here. I made these kind of yoga mat size bed sheet pieces of fabric that each person who came in the gallery had a place to take their shoes off, and they could take one of these cloths, and these were all dyed with plants from my property in New Mexico. This was a broom snakeweed, makes a beautiful golden color. There's lots of golden hues in this landscape, which I love the subtlety of, like the light golden hue to the mid-tones to the darker. And so I love dyeing fabric. I particularly like dyeing it with the plants. I love gathering the plants with my children, and they, fabric dyeing is just like a wonderful thing to do with kids. So I often incorporate them into the process. But in that experience, you could lay down, and we had these hanging plant sculptures above you. So you would lay down on the earth on one of these fabric mats and look up and have a ceiling of New Mexico dried plants above you. So yes, I love natural dye.
Do you have any creative rituals? You talked a little bit about sort of meditation as you kind of lie down and you think about your art. Do you have any other sorts of, rituals to kind of get you thinking about work and get you inspired about work?
Mm-hmm. My rituals, it's not a ritual that I have daily necessarily. I really like the seasons really influence when I work and how much I work. And I often do have breaks of months where I'm just gathering. I call it kind of a hunting and gathering period, where I'm just reading, photographing, but I'm not actually like making anything, but I consider it like an integral part of my process. And I think I like when rituals are freeing, and it's kind of an oxymoron in a way, because rituals do imply the regularity, but I also want to know when that regularity needs to shift. And so I might have my more winter-oriented rituals, which I do find are a lot more introspective and slower. And then getting into the garden in the spring and seeing everything come to life, and I'm getting other ideas from that. So I do, I guess my rituals keep sort of changing throughout the year, but there is sort of a cyclical nature to it. And it also is very impacted by what's happening in my family with 2 young children. their rituals are your rituals, right? So I just, nighttime is my time for myself and my husband. So I do think that that is a time when I work a lot, is at night.
So, just last question, Mira, before we wrap up. This is a really broad question, and it might not be totally fair. So answer it however whatever direction you'd like to go in. I see your practice really being about connecting with yourself and really being in the present. How do you see your work in relation to, everything going on right now? In the midst of a pandemic, global, national unrest, when so much of your work is about healing and rest?
Yeah, it's a really big question that I think we're all just soul searching about right now in so many different ways. And I'm honestly, although it's like horrific what's happening, I'm also like relieved that we're finally addressing some very, very important things essential to our humanity. So, on a basic level, I think the pace, having all of us slow down, is really important to learning. I mean, all the studies say that we're going to get dumber if we keep multitasking all the time and doing too much, that the intelligence really comes in a place of being, not doing. The doing will just naturally follow. That's what I feel. I feel like the being is somewhat of a spiritual practice, but also just very connected to the breath and honestly, my children are my greatest teachers about this right now. They are seriously guiding me through this time more than I'm guiding them. And I think that probably that listening to both the very young people and the elders in our world right now is probably like one of the best things that we can do. And they're often, especially in the Western world, not necessarily looked on as our teachers, but I really, really do believe they are. So I certainly don't have any answers, but I feel in those experiences, pure heart and lightness really has a lot of, and even plants can actually teach us about these properties in a very intelligent way if we really look to them. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think we're all kind of compelled to do what you've been naturally doing, because we're always on the go, go, go. But now we're all kind of stopped. We're forced to stop and kind of take in our surroundings and just slow down and contemplate and reflect. And I think this is a really wonderful place to conclude. And I just want to thank you again for showing us your beautiful home, your working space, your creative space. Thank you for talking to us today and showing us your wonderful works. Can't wait to see these works in person. Fingers crossed in our galleries. In October 8th is when the show is slated to open. We hope everyone will be able to join us in celebrating these wonderful artists. And thank you again to the committees, to our members, of course, to our artists for all of your support for this initiative and all of our initiatives at NMWA. Carolyn, anything to conclude? you're muted. Yeah.
I just want to, echo Aureen's thanks to you, Mira, for taking the time to show us your amazing work and process. It was a little day trip to Mexico, and it was wonderful. So we thank you so much. And as you said, especially in this current world that we're living in, getting to experience your work and hear from you directly really is so inspirational, amazing. So thank you so much for having us with you today.